I was privileged enough to be invited into a WhatsApp group with quite a few leading lights, let's call it, in this fight against what's going on. And as you know, I'm going to have to be careful with the wording of this too. This last few years, we've had all sorts of mandates thrust upon us that were not necessary and ended up highly profitable for certain drug companies. I'm going to read you this out because this WhatsApp group I was invited into was for social media influencers, journalists, GB News commentators, and it was Aseem Malhotra, who's the cardiologist that hasn't just stood up about the recent rollout, but about the methods and devious behaviour in some instances of the big pharma industry. Now, last night in Leicester Square at the Odeon, there was a premiere of a film called First Do No Harm, which is a play on pharmacy, you know, big drug companies, and the Hippocratic Oath. It was full of content from revered people from Harvard University, cardiologists, expert researchers, and it wasn't just about one drug, it was about many things. It was more about the way these drugs are purveyed to us as a solution when they're not really a solution. They're more of a treatment to perpetuate treatment. You could be forgiven for thinking that anyway. So what I was astounded, I haven't seen the full film, I've only been privileged enough to see clips. It will be available. When it is, it'll probably be on YouTube. I'll draw your attention to it. There's a wealth of information there if you're on long-term drugs like statins, beta blockers, diabetic drugs. There's so much information in that film, it's untrue. One thing I was surprised to read, which was this comment, and I've asked if I can share this, and Howard's agreed. Howard Cox, the Reform Party candidate for the London mayor election, he runs the page about stopping duty on fuel. He's a good all-rounder. But as I'm reading through the comments, which were congratulating Aseem on the success of the film, the invited audience, I was invited, but I don't go to these things. I live up north. I've got dogs. It's not easy. I'm privileged to be thought well enough off to get an invite. But one thing I was surprised at was Howard's comment this morning in the group, as we're all congratulating Aseem on the immense work that's gone into this, the contributors, and how it's panned out. This is the sort of documentary that should be on the BBC, it should be on ITV, it should be on all the mainstream media, but instead they'd rather fill the airwaves with, oh, who's going to be the next Tory leader, like anybody cares. A spent party that's crashed and burned. They're still putting the flames out on the crash site and they're wondering who's going to drive the bus away. Nobody cares. I care about this because this affects all of us. This is Howard Cox. I didn't know his background, so I'll just read you out his comment. I was honoured to attend Aseem's masterpiece last night. In the first 20 years of my working life, back in 1973, I'm going to have to struggle with this, it's big words, pharmacologist at Wellcome Research Laboratories, now known as GlaxoSmithKline, I was privileged to work under two Nobel Prize winners on H2 beta receptor prostaglandin syntheses and NSAID drug technologies. NSAID are non-steroid anti-inflammatory drugs, your ibuprofen, etc. I was routinely pressurised to give positive preclinical data published on impossible to cure indications such as arthritis, ulcers, asthma and heart disease. That chronic symptomatic treatment was the only profitable choice. I'm going to read that again. He was pressurised to publish clinical data on impossible to cure indications such as arthritis, ulcers, asthma, heart disease. That chronic symptomatic treatment was the only profitable choice. What does that say to you? Chronic symptomatic treatment was the only profitable choice. How many people are on long-term drugs? The other good thing about the film, I'll finish Howard's quote off in a minute. The other good thing about the film, it doesn't just pick holes in the way things are done. The most scary part is how we are delivered the information from tests and trials. Again, the pressure from the manufacturers to have positive reports, wording theses and wording research in a manner that leads them to believe that they're more effective than they are. This goes on right across the board. So you could be forgiven for thinking the medical industry has been captured by the people supplying the drugs. I'm not saying that all doctors are bad. Doctors, if you're going into that kind of thing, you're going into it with a good heart. But then you become part of the rat on the wheel, don't you? You're in the machine then, you're in the big machine. And when was the last time you went to a doctor? Fortunately, my stepdaughter's been to a doctor recently who suggested some holistic medicine instead of going down a drug-related route. That's pretty positive, a young doctor. So that fills me with a bit of hope. But nevertheless, there's been an awful lot of controversy surrounding the route we've taken where a big pharma are making a shed load of money from us being ill. As it's often said on social media, there's no profit in wellness. Because if they cure you, you don't need them again. But if they can give you something that you need to take every day for the rest of your life, cha-ching, the tills are hot. Anyway, Howard continues. It's not just the fact that unchecked drug firms still do not research cures. That's a worry, isn't it? Unchecked research drug firms do not research cures. It's the role of complicit, unelected, biased regulatory bodies around the world that allow them to continue to make huge sums at the expense of saving lives. I'm going to read it again. It's not just the fact that unchecked drug firms still do no research cures. It's the role of the complicit, unelected, biased regulatory bodies around the world that allow them to continue to make huge sums at the expense of saving lives. This is an evocative, impactful movie that everyone must see, especially the decision makers in Whitehall. It moved me beyond belief. Sorry I couldn't stay for the after drinks party, but he's preparing for his 15th year campaigning against the painful budget on the October the 30th. And he'll need our support on that. Well, you'll definitely get it, Howard. I had no idea he had so many strings to your bow. Howard Cox has a Twitter page. He's very active. He'd have been a much better London mayor, wouldn't he? A man with this sort of attitude to life. We've missed out there, but we've probably missed out because we didn't know enough about him. Anyway, the thing is, Asim has had his career cancelled because of this. He's a cardiologist, very knowledgeable man. His father was a doctor. You know, we need to investigate this. We need to do more of our own research. We don't need to sit there in the doctor's surgery like a victim. You know, it used to be when my mum and dad went to the doctor was revered and you sat there, yes doctor, no doctor. Because generally speaking, a lot of the time you walked away with no pills, no prescription, maybe just some advice. And I do think doctors are under pressure. I think the public abuse the NHS, I really do. And I think the system's set up to profiteer. Different here because we have the NHS, which is falling to pieces, and in America it's a pay for view, isn't it? You've got to pay for your health service, and you can have a tier system. That's a bit scary, especially if you end up with something like cancer, because you usually reach your ceiling. So there are good things about the NHS where you can get availability to treatment, but the bad thing about it is it's typical government-run enterprise that there's no thought for any cost savings. They pay through the nose for everything. If you get a prescription you don't need it, even if it's a blister pack and it's never been opened, there's no facility to hand that back to the pharmacist where it can be reused and recycled. There's all this talk about recycling, but we never do it with drugs. If they're in date and they're not opened, what's the problem? Someone else could benefit from that. But let's face it, the pharmacy's already had his cut out of it. The GP surgery's had his cut out of it. They don't want the drug back. They've made the money. They don't care if it goes in the bin. That's the bit of the NHS that I think is wrong. I think another thing that's wrong is that people are missing appointments. You wouldn't dare miss an appointment if you were paying for it. If it was £15 to access your doctor, you'd think twice before you rang him and you wouldn't not show up. So there's got to be some reform. I'm not saying you should pay to see your GP. There's got to be some reform. This film that Asim Malhotra has made should be blasted out on the TV screens so we can pay more attention to our own health. And, you know, you see these journalists, they call themselves investigative journalists. They don't investigate anything, do they? You know, Emily Maitlis talking to the Prince, who might be a bit of a nonce. Who cares, really? I mean, this isn't stuff we need to know about. This isn't stuff that will benefit our lives. What will benefit our lives is knowing where we're being done over with big firms, pharmaceutical companies, drug companies, people that make weed killers, things that go on with big chemical plants that we never get told about until there's an investigation 10 years later after a shed load of cattle have died. We need to be on this, and that's why I've read Howard's comment out, because I think that piece of information, you see, this is where I'm like, that piece of information makes me go off like, whoa, Howard Cox has just said this about when he worked in that industry, about how he was pressurised to make things sound positive when they weren't sure whether it was positive or not. And the emphasis on repetitive prescription drugs to sustain the need for the prescription, almost. So we need to take care of ourselves. No one's going to look at, I say this time and time again in these videos on here, you're the number one focus. You're going to take care of your family more than any outside. I don't care if it's your doctor, your accountant, your solicitor. I don't care if it's your financial advisor. You're the one. You're the one with the investment. You're the one with the emotional and financial investment in your life. And you need to put more effort in. I know this thread will fill up with people who are already doing it. But you, if you have that knowledge, can also help other people by sharing it with them. Because this is living proof that you're not on the wrong track, isn't it? 5 a day. 5 good things a day that you supply yourself. Little things that make that crisp difference to that day being a little bit more special than yesterday. That's what you've got to concentrate on. And doing things like this is part of it. And it's not easy to stay positive all the time. I've been a bit under the weather lately. I've had a bit of a cold. That's nothing. I fought that off. But I've got a problem with like a ligament injury. And I felt a bit sorry for myself. And I've been taking it easy because I'm a good patient. I'll do what I'm told. But it does get you down when you're not feeling well. And so you're desperate to seek advice and a cure. And we've gone through the 60s and 70s where pill popping was the thing, you know, the advent of the birth control pill. Great painkillers. I'm not knocking things that are good. Over-the-counter stuff that can ease the symptoms of something that you've got. I'm not knocking any of that. I'm not saying it's a big, bad, scary industry. I'm saying it's a massive profit-driven machine. It's got out of hand and we've got to get it back on track so it serves us instead of fueling their profit masters. Because when the chairman of Moderna had his annual general meeting, he stood down since, the Frenchman, can't remember his name and I don't care about it. He stood there in front of his shareholders and he said, remember, Moderna is an investment company that happens to make drugs. That one paragraph says it all. So this is why we have to take control and charge of our own health as much as we can. Try non-invasive treatments. You know, I've had back trouble for years and been prescribed all sorts. Been to see everything from osteopaths to physios to acupuncturists. I've been to everything. I've done everything. They've dangled me upside down in a bag. Everything's gone on. And you know what treats my back the best? Rest. The McKenzie technique. Google it if you've got a bad back. It's worth looking into. And a hot water bottle tucked beneath it until the inflammation goes away. No drugs. Painkillers won't take it away. And I've seen so many people, it's this quick fix mentality. Oh, I've got a bad back, I'm going to have an operation. I haven't come across one person who's had a successful back operation yet. And I know loads because it's something I'm interested in. I'm dying to see the success of it. Oh, great. If he's had a back operation, see how he goes on. A lot of them ex-sportsmen, they're not back in their sports. So this is why I mean, every day you're the most important thing in your life. Everything that's good in your life, you put there. Not a government, not a drug company. You put it in your life. So it's up to you to have that gumption to think, hang on, you've got your phone, you've got Google, you've got other search engines. You can find out more information about your needs rather than just being directed by one person sat behind a chair who's possibly getting paid to give you some stuff.